Welcome. Today is Thursday, August 23rd, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee. Today I am joined by Councilmembers Jeremiah Ellison, Councilmember Andrea Jenkins, and Councilmember Linnea Palmisano. We will be joined by Councilmember Steve Fletcher shortly. He is coming back from another city appointment. And so today we have a very important set of discussion items on issues impacting our city. And so I would like to just go ahead and get started with our consent agenda and approve that. The consent agenda includes 5 items, and we have 2 items for discussion. And I'm wondering, before approving the consent agenda, if there are any questions from our committee members on that. Seeing no questions, then the consent items involve a contract with Bracken's Consulting and Psychological Services for police employee mental health services. Item number 2 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, the Office of Traffic Safety, for a DWI enforcement officer. Item number 3 is a redistribution of pulse oximeters from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources to the Minneapolis Fire Department. Item number 4 is the Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training and Education Training Academy reimbursement. And item number 5 is a Minnesota Board of Firefighter Training and Education Training reimbursement redistribution. So if there are no questions on that, I would like to move those items to be approved. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Opposed? Nay. Okay, so all of that moves forward. And we are up to now our first item of discussion, which is a report from the Minneapolis Police Department and the Health Department regarding the tent encampment on Hiawatha Avenue. So I just want to say that this issue was first flagged into my office last week when we started to get a variety of phone calls on the issue. And I know that Councilmember Warsame, where the encampment is currently housed on, was also getting some phone calls. And so it's been really great to see our mayor's office really step up and make this issue a top priority. And there's been lots of discussions with him, with his office, our office, and with lots of the leaders that are here today. So I'm really glad to know that there was a press conference early this morning to address the same topic. And so we're going to use our Public Safety Committee to look into this issue as well, to have council members ask questions, and then to talk about next steps. So why don't we go ahead and start with our city coordinator, Nuria Rivera Vandermeid, if you could help us frame up the conversation, and then we will go ahead with our MPD leaders, health, and we also have community members and leaders who are going to be helping help us understand the issue a little bit more.
Thank you, Chair Cano and committee members. My name is Nuria Rivera Vandermeid, and I'm the city coordinator for the city of Minneapolis. I know it is known to everyone that for the past several weeks we've had a large encampment of people over at the intersection of Hiawatha and Cedar Avenues. The camp started a little bit over 6 weeks ago and has really grown exponentially. We started from 10 to 15. It has now grown over to about 75 tents, I am understanding. And there are as many as 120 people that are at the encampment. This is an issue that has highlighted not the immediate issue of the encampment, but really a longstanding issue that really deals with chronic homelessness, opioid addiction, medical issues, lack of housing, lack of culturally appropriate housing, and a variety of other things that are really systemic. And it has really been highlighting an opportunity for us to address this in a very different way. You'll hear from staff and from community members about some of the parts that they have been moving forward to address some immediate short-term needs. But we also have a longer-term future that we're looking at. And one of the things that I really want to highlight is, and to say that I'm frankly humbled and proud to stand in solidarity with community, that we are very solidly standing with community to support the efforts that we're being asked to support, that we can bring to the table whatever resources that we have. And we have a variety of partners we've been working with, including the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors, and they have brought their leadership to the fore. They have also named a coordinator on their end, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. The Minneapolis American Indian Center, Natives Against Heroin, Native American Community Development Institute, the American Indian Community Development Corporation, the American Indian OIC, the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, the Southside Harm Reduction, Indigenous Peoples Task Force, the Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Transportation, Hennepin County, St. Stephen's Human Services, People Incorporated, Native American Community Clinic, Indian Health Board, Community University Healthcare Clinic, and there are probably more that I have left off that list. But I really want to highlight that because this is really a community partnered initiative. It is not something that we as the city want to feel that we are leading, but rather we are supporting and we are standing alongside and in solidarity with community as we move forward. So you're going to hear some of the efforts that we've done as a city to support those efforts, what the needs are, the immediate healthcare needs in particular of the encampment. But we also, those of you who tuned into the press conference earlier, have worked with community with a plan to say we need longer term strategy to this. We're going to do everything we can to try to get to the point where we can end the encampment by the end of September, but we know that that by itself will not be the end of the story because there is longer term issues here. If not, we will be right back where we started from. So we have tasked our innovation team. We are looking at other internal partners and our community partners and our governmental partners to say we've got to come up with different strategies on what housing looks like, what lower barrier or no barrier housing look like, what supporting health and opioid support and addiction support services look like, because just finding a bed is not going to solve this issue. So with that, unless there are questions, I am happy to step aside and tee it off for our next speaker.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. And we shall welcome our 3rd Precinct Inspector Sullivan and Mr. Grant Snyder. When you're ready, please go ahead and give us a briefing of the work that you all have been doing there.
All right. Public Safety Emergency Management Committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to be able to talk about what the 3rd Precinct and what the Minneapolis Police Department is doing and who we're collaborating with regard to the tent encampment. So just to kind of clarify what we're talking about, and this is the homeless tent encampment near the Hiawatha Avenue Highway. It's almost approximately 3 blocks long. It's near the sound wall that was constructed by the Minnesota Department of Transportation. The northwest corner starts at 16th and Franklin and kind of runs in a curvature all the way down to the southeast end at 22nd and 18th Avenue. The tent encampment has been there for approximately the past 3 months and has grown exponentially over the couple of months that where we are today. Right now, it has about 70 plus tents and well over 100 people camping there right now. I'd like to talk about our public safety response, talking about some of our collaborations, some of our basic police response, and then talk about our collaborations that are ongoing, and then hand it over to Sergeant Grant Snyder to talk about some of the specifics. So with regard to our engagement piece, Sergeant Grant Snyder started several months ago doing outreach from a Minneapolis police perspective to the tent encampment, doing just outreach, basic outreach to a lot of the tenters there. Most of them know Sergeant Grant Snyder by name. We have also increased our safety patrols nearly 500% in probably the last month in this area. We've done this with our direct patrols with officers and squads, just basically providing a public safety presence. We're not necessarily doing any focused enforcement in that area, but just providing safety. We've also in place 2 mobile trailer cameras, one at the northwest corner and one down at that southeast end of the sound wall. The reason why we have increased our direct patrols there and have placed the cameras was because of our concern for the public safety of the tent encampment. Also, these 2 things have been requested strongly by many of the Native American nonprofit association leaders who are involved in collaborating with responding to this area. So they've communicated to the mayor, to the chief, that these are things that they wanted for that area. The calls from 2017 to this area, from 911 calls for police service for about June, July, and August up to now, from 2017 to 2018, have not necessarily increased. One of the things I think why they have not is because we've really drastically increased our directed patrols in that area just to show that we're there. The other reason why we're increasing them, besides a public safety presence, is just so that if we can respond quickly to any kind of a disturbance or any violence that might happen there. I'd like to end by just saying that we are collaborating continually with all of the Native American nonprofit associations and their leadership on a daily basis, along with all city department entities that are involved, from the public health department and the waste department and etc. So at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Sergeant Grant Snyder to talk about some of the specifics that he may be doing in the tent encampment itself.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thanks a lot for receiving this update. I appreciate it. So I've been on the ground now in that camp pretty much since I was first transferred into this initiative in the 1st of April. When we started, there was essentially only one tent there, and it was in fact on the other side of the sound wall on the corner of the MPHA property. And that family that was living in that tent had been there for some time. They have since relocated a couple of different times, and they are now on the other side of the wall. And so they're actually probably our original family that's been on that wall over there. When I say family, it's a sort of an extended family of individuals. As Inspector Sullivan said, we've seen the size of this encampment grow over a period of several months, and the real increase and dynamic growth has happened pretty much within about the last 5 to 6 weeks. There's a number of different factors that have sort of accompanied that, and I'm apprehensive to, in many ways, even call this an encampment, because in a lot of ways it's really kind of become a small city, and with that it has brought city-sized problems, a number of which have been issues of solid waste. There's been issues of for example, the issues of bathroom. We have a lot of issues with feces and human waste and stuff like that on the property. That's been one of the biggest factors that has sort of led to the deterioration of the environment very quickly. I would never presume to speak for individuals that have been out there, but it's hard for me to tell the story and not refer to some of those conversations. The majority of my time, certainly in the last month, I would say about 90% of it has been spent in that encampment. And it's been in that relational space that I sort of promised to all of you back a couple of months ago that I was on how I was going to approach this initiative. And so when some of my friends that from the camp are here, and I'm assuming that they will give their own version of that. So please take in context what I'm telling you. But I've had the opportunity to ask them, what in particular is it about this camp that makes you feel safe, unsafe? And there's been a change in that over a period of time as that camp has grown in size. With more people have come more issues, and one of those issues has been a factionalization that really didn't exist early on in the process. Whenever you get groups of people together, certainly in difficult situations, we expect that there will be disagreements, and for the most part, I think many of those were handled internally and with good conscience, and over time we've had some alarming issues that I've been told about. One of the more recent ones that was very concerning, that actually was told to me by two of the people that are sitting here, was a group of people that were going tent to tent looking for single women about a week ago, and that has been repeated over and over again about the level of vulnerability of the people in this camp. And so we've tried to do a number of different things and to try and address that, and certainly Inspector Sullivan's patrols have been very effective in going through there. That roadway, we've tried to figure out a way to secure that, and we've been working with Public Works on that. Part of the challenge there is that a lot of people bringing in food and bringing in other things like that, they use that roadway. Well, the nights that I've been there, that roadway is completely dark, and I've had to pull people pretty much off of the concrete apron there that were laying there, and if a truck or a car or something came through, wouldn't necessarily see them because they were asleep on it or they were passed out or something like that. And so there's a real safety issue around access to that roadway, and I'm not even talking about the facility itself and the ability of the roadway to handle that kind of vehicular traffic. There's in my personal opinion, one of the challenges that we faced recently, and it relates to migration out of the camp, and one individual here could speak to that. I'm not going to speak for that person, but I've asked people when I've ran into them in other camps, why did you move? And the most common thing that I've been told is because of the increased amount of heroin use and drug use in the camp, it's created an environment that feels very unsafe. So that's been a big concern of mine. I've gone tent to tent to make sure that people had Narcan available, and that we sort of talked about immediate and emergency planning if in fact something bad were to happen. As many people know, there was an OD in that camp a couple of weeks ago, and that person did survive, but it's been a challenge, and it's been a big concern. The final thing that I would say specifically about that camp has been the number of children. Early on, we tried very, very hard to sort of monitor that situation. I've been in touch with Hennepin County Child Protection on a couple of occasions, and we've been going back and forth and having those discussions. The number of children has increased dramatically just in the last week, and the majority of them, I believe, are visitors. It's been challenging to determine if, in fact, the kids are staying there. There was one young woman that was staying there, but she has since been relocated, and so we're trying to stay on top of that as much as we possibly can. So I know that's a short briefing, but at this point, I'd invite Inspector Sullivan, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to take those.
We don't see any questions right now, so we can keep moving forward through the presentation to involve health, and maybe throughout the session there might be questions that come up for you both. But thank you so much for your
Thank you again very much
attention
for this opportunity.
on this. So now we have, yes, our Director of Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Gretchen Musicant. I'm the Commissioner of Health for Minneapolis. And I just wanted to do a tiny bit of background about how we are working, and then tell you what we are doing. So our approach to engaging in this situation is to really work with the community, and that means to work with them to identify the needs, to coordinate our responses, and then in communicating back and forth about what the plans are. There are three core functions in public health. It's our approach that we take. One is assessment, secondly is assurance, and thirdly is policy. And so we have taken our time to figure out what the situation is, and as you've heard, it's dynamic, and so we're always trying to figure out what the latest needs are. Assurance means that we want to make sure that those needs are addressed, and because we are working with this broad community of responders from the community organizations and other parts of the city, we don't want to leap in and say it's, we're in charge, here we come, but more, are all these needs being addressed in some way? And so what I'm going to describe to you is that approach. The final function, that policy function, I think is maybe something that we all will think of together as we get into the long-term solutions and think about, are there organizational policies, are there city policies, are there state policies that might need to be changed in order to meet some of the underlying issues. So our first priority is to protect the lives and the health of residents. And some of the immediate issues that we identified are sanitation and hydration. And so it takes surprisingly long to get simple things done, but now there are 7 new porta potties that are there, 3 at one end and 4 at the other. There are 4 hand washing stations, 2 with 1 set of porta potties and 2 with the other. And we have worked with Public Works for them to use a hydrant and to create a water fountain station as well. Another need is disposal of needles. There are some sharps containers that are provided. They're fairly modest in size, and so we are working on procuring some larger containers so that we can accommodate more of a cleanup. We also are aware of situations in other cities across the country in the last year or so where there have been similar encampments. There have been hepatitis A outbreaks, and we certainly do want to avoid that. So some of the approaches that are being contemplated, one is further sanitation. As you heard, because there wasn't enough facility provided initially for going to the bathroom. There is a need to clear away some of the human waste that might still be there, and so we're working on how that might be done. And a second approach is hepatitis A vaccination. This is something the county is thinking of doing throughout the homeless community, not particular to the encampment, and so we're working with the community about how that would work at the encampment if we were to offer vaccinations. A second area is drug use. As you've heard, while that certainly is not something that is an issue for every single resident of the encampment, it is an issue in terms of the overall environment and how it is changing. And here there are several community-based organizations that are already on the ground working on needle exchange, providing Narcan, some of the more modest-sized sharps containers, offering addiction assessment and access to treatment. And so a number of those are supported by the State Health Department, and so we're working with them on leveraging additional dollars to support more intensive work, and also trying to make sure that we are helping them coordinate amongst themselves so that they can decide, who's going to be present on what days, or who's going to take which piece of the situation. We are also working with the State Health Department and Hennepin County Healthcare for the Homeless. The State Health Department is tracking the epidemiology of infections. We want to make sure that we are tracking anything that is occurring that might be being passed from one person to another at the encampment. Healthcare for the Homeless, Minneapolis has, the Health Department has a contract for services with them, so we're working hand in glove with them. They are doing person-to-person surveillance, and they have identified some skin infections, some shortness of breath. They have helped people complete medical forms, but no real outbreak or anything like that has been identified. Recently, as we have met with some of our partners in the community, the MUD partners would like to create a survey of housing needs and challenges that would be completed by the encampment residents, and so we are using our research department to help develop that survey for them. That's the end of my initial report, and so I will sit down and see if there are questions later, or if you have questions now.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions right now, but appreciate the report. So now we'll shift over to the community end of the presentation, and I'm aware that there's, we might have one question here. Councilmember Ellison.
You mentioned that there was going to be a you mentioned that there was going to be a survey about the housing needs. Is that going to come with a recommendation, and then who will that be? Will that be presented to this committee, or?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilmember Ellison. I'm just sorting through exactly where the ownership of that information is going to lie, and I did speak with my research staff today to talk with some of the MUD members about what their thinking is in terms of that information, and if they want to hold that, or if we want to hold that, or if we want to analyze it for them. So I think we're still on the cusp of answering that question.
Thank you.
Sounds good. So we're going to shift over now to the community portion of this, and we have a variety of folks who have been on the ground working on this issue. So would first like to open up the floor to anyone who might be here from the encampment that lives there, that is an impacted individual. And if you feel comfortable speaking now or speaking later, it's up to you. We have about 3 or 4 speakers lined up to talk about the nonprofits that have been supporting. We have representatives here from the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors Group, who was part of the press conference this morning. I know St. Stephen's was invited to speak, as well as the United Communities Outreach Group that is currently funded by the city of Minneapolis. So if anyone would like to come up from the families who are impacted, feel free to just come forward, and you can state your name and share with us a 3-minute testimony of what you think the City Council should be thinking about when we're looking at this issue. Thank you. Welcome.
My name's Karen Pacheco. I'm currently a tenant at the encampment, and I guess I have more questions than I've told this story 100 times, and nothing has come out of it. Nothing. I've seen bright moments, but as for actual housing for myself, my family's been broken up by this. I've had to send my granddaughter away. I don't see any. What I'd like to hear from the community is, I know St. Stephen's came through and did assessments, but all I've seen is growth. Every day, 10 or 20, 5 to 10 at least new tents or families there every day. We're not seeing any change. We've got some porta potties, got some, but what we're looking for, we're tired of talking about what's going on when there's no change. It's getting worse. And with the growth, comes along, and with the addiction that is there, not everybody, that's not the only issue there, but what's there, we got a lot of predatory people coming in. It's basically mostly native, but there's outsiders who see a chance to make money. That's going to be an issue, especially with children now. And so far, it's not been out of hand, but I see it coming. I've lived in this neighborhood all my life. And there, like I said today, there's been kind of a hands-off approach to the needle users and stuff, but it's becoming, with the health issues that it can bring, there's got to be a little bit of interference there, a little bit more discreet with the children, with there's, like in any community, you can't just ignore what's laying on the ground, the health issues that it brings for the people that are using also. We do need the needle exchange, we do need Narcan, but also they need help. We just can't keep Narcaning people who OD. That's not at all a solution. There has to be some kind of support. I found out by accident about the news conference today, which incensed me when I got there and found out that me and a woman who came with me were about the only people from the encampment. We were not even notified to speak, to bring our knowledge to a news conference about grown people who live it. So I'm glad that we're invited here today, because you can't keep just talking about us. You have to talk to us. And that's all I'm asking. You can't keep us out of the loop. We in the meantime, we will decide our own leadership. We will take care of things as we see it coming. I did say something today. Sergeant Snyder has actually pitched a tent. And I really strongly encourage anybody who's truly interested to come and pitch a tent and live it for one night. And you won't need me up here. You will see. But I also want to say, there's many moments of true community. It's not all chaos, and there's many moments of true community, and there's many leaders out there. But you can't leave them out of the loop. It just won't work. And that's all I'm hoping for in the immediate future. But people are real tired of you send someone out to do another assessment. Everybody just did an assessment. At least tell us if there was some growth from that. Then maybe you'll get some more people to talk. But people get tired of talking about, how down and out they are with no results. So I would propose if today some things can't come out of it, that it be shared with the community, the encampment. And then you'll get a lot more people talking, or they're going to ignore you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pacheco. And just a reminder, if you could at some time go over and check in with our clerk. She just needs to take down some information for the public record. Today's meeting is both televised and documented on the city website. So we just like to have good records of our conversations, and would appreciate anyone that comes to speak to check in with Kelly after you're done. So noted on reporting back to the impacted folks on what we discuss here today and the next action steps after this. And so now, in terms of our speakers, we will have, if there's, I don't know if there's other folks from the impacted area who want to speak, please feel free to come up and say your name. And
Hi, I'm Gretchen McKenz. I stay at the camp. I've been there a couple of weeks. Also, outside of all the people, we do have 1 cat and 2 dogs there also that are affected by being homeless. And, you know, you go around the city here and you see all kinds of vacant buildings, houses, and then there's all kinds of new housing coming up, being built. And why is there a homeless problem? We shouldn't have one with all the new houses being built and the vacant ones, you know. It doesn't make sense that there's empty buildings and homes, and yet there's a huge homeless problem. Outside of we're at an encampment on Hiawatha, there's dozens of other camps around. I was camped over at behind Target along the bike trail, and the cops had come there yesterday and told us we had to leave to go to the Hiawatha camp. You know, well, that was nice, and it was really nice that they didn't cut up our tents, because there are cops that do that. We'll cut our tents up and that, and it's like, I don't see no sense in that either, because that's about the only thing that protects us from the elements. And it's just, I don't see a lot of sense in a lot of things about what, like the development of new homes and that. And there's empty ones all over, you know, and along Franklin there, next to that church, I think it's right on Portland. There's a big church there, and there's a apartment building alongside it, and it's been empty for years, and it looks like has been started to be renovated, but that's as far as it got, and it's still empty. And it's like, I don't see no sense in a homeless problem when that building could be renovated by some group and put to use, you know, put homeless people in there. It's like, and I've worked with Monica quite a bit at the Capitol advocating, and I worked on various homeless committees, and as to date, I don't know if there is any more homeless advocacy groups anywhere in the state. And I know Homeless Against Homelessness, I'm not sure, that's not running no more. And I helped start one in Duluth, a homeless committee. And, you know, we did a lot of advocacy at the Capitol. And it's like, everybody wants, you know, who's homeless is hollering, why isn't there help? Well, there can be if we all get together and start a group like St. Stephen's had, Homeless Against Homelessness. Up in Duluth, we were TPAC, Twin Ports Action Coalition. And there was one in St. Paul. They were the first ones. That was advocacy group for homeless people. And I think being homeless, we need more of those groups going to go to the Capitol and rally and advocate. I think that's what, if we all work together, I think we can end the homeless problem. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate that. So we will now move on to hear from the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors Group. If you could please come up. And then next we will have Lance Lamont from United Communities Outreach. And then after that we have John Tribbett from St. Stephen's.
Madam Chair, committee members, thanks for this opportunity to discuss this very urgent and topical issue, this crisis. I'm Robert Lilligren. I am the CEO of Native American Community Development Institute and here as Vice Chair of the Metro Urban Indian Directors, or MUD. And I really want to thank the residents that came down. They spoke at the press event today as well. And I think that powerful and authentic perspective right out of the community that has sprung up along the wall on Hiawatha is the most powerful perspective that we could have. I really want to thank the representatives of Natives Against Heroin, and I look forward to hearing from them. They are the incredible partners. They have been doing very, very grassroots outreach. They have established the relationships, the rapport, and the credibility within the community that is growing up there that will really serve the city and the partners who are looking to support their efforts, and they're invaluable, and I look forward to working further with them. I want to thank your leadership here, the mayor's leadership, having the city leaders stand in this position of supporting this community, supporting the efforts is critical and crucial, from protecting the property that is not yours, it belongs to the state, belong to the Minnesota Department of Transportation, but having the city leadership embrace the community there and work with the other governmental jurisdictions to protect that community, to give us time as partners to figure out the best solutions. And just to briefly contextualize what's going on there, and I know you don't need any reminder, but when government's objectives historically had been to eliminate people by stealing culture, language, land, social infrastructure, this is the result. And now we have an opportunity here as this predominantly Native community has come back to a very identifiably Native part of our city. It feels almost like this community is at home there. I think we have an opportunity when we have such a collection of Native folks to really not just address the immediate needs, but to start to work together to address the systemic needs and to start change within the system that will support the Native community and at every step of the way of keeping the community, those most impacted, at the forefront of what we're trying to do. And at Metro Urban Indian Directors, at MUD, that's exactly the role we're seeking to play. MUD organizations have been redirecting resources, adapting programs as quickly as possible to respond to the needs within the camp. And organizations like the American Indian Community Development Corporation have prioritized outreach to women who are ready to move. Just within the last few days, they were able to house 4 vulnerable women in available space that they had. And the CEO, Mike Gozzi at AICDC, is working with all levels of jurisdiction, city, county, state, to bring as many facilities as he can online as quickly as possible, and seeking ways of working within the system, but to facilitate the creation of new units, the creation of new housing. Minnesota Indians Resource Center, almost every service organization actually in the area has brought people to the camp, have been present in the camp, but we do acknowledge that there are others doing outreach like Natives Against Heroin who are better situated to do the direct outreach. I'm glad that the emphasis came up on getting information out to the camp and also getting information back to the camp, and that's one thing that MUD seeks to do. We're trying to align community efforts, partner efforts in a coordinated fashion. We see that the state agencies are responding, city definitely, county, tribes are starting to try to figure out how they can be most supportive. And so resources will be loosened up and directed to support the community at the camp. And we feel it's important that that happens in a coordinated way, and that resources aren't at cross purposes, or there isn't a glut of resources that can't be fully fully used and employed in the community just because there's no coordination. And so Minnesota Indian Resource Center has hired a coordinator to work on behalf of the Native community. She's already connected with the city coordinator and others to just start to better coordinate. There's a website that just went online this morning. It's still somewhat under construction, but it is franklinhiawatha.camp.org. And there's an opportunity to donate at that site. There will also be, we hope to set up communication lines with Natives Against Heroin so that they can be collecting an inventory, maybe daily, of some of the needs within the camp that can then be posted at franklinhiawathacamp.org. Direct people where they can drop off donations of food or goods, and so that they can be facilitated with the help of the community and Natives Against Heroin into the camp where they're most needed. And so that MUD is hoping that becomes sort of the central communications point between the residents, those doing outreach, the Native organizations, and other partners that want to bring help and support. It's been mentioned here already that this is a chance to look at policy, look at practice, and to really hear from the community in the camp, the Native community, what the housing needs are, what the culturally specific way of going forward is here. To do that, we have to make sure that we're always putting the community first, and that is what MUD is very committed to. And I really want to commend the city coordinator, the MPD, the inspector, the sergeant, the health commissioner, the health staff. They've just been really present, and like city leadership, like the mayor, have been insistent that it is the community that needs to be put first here. And I think as we work through the crisis and the immediate needs and move on to the midterm and long-term solutions, that is a model that we can learn from. And yes, we're doing it now in sort of the immediate needs crisis response, but if we can do it in a systemic way, I think that goes a ways to addressing the structural issues that keep a large part of the Native community in a homeless state. So again, my thanks to the city for being willing to listen to this, for the support of the grassroots organizations, the residents, and of the Native nonprofits that are really trying to work together with you as your partner to address the immediate needs, midterm needs, and long-term needs. And I'm happy to stand for questions. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you. I don't see any questions right now, and appreciate that that presence of support and continued boots on the ground from the Metropolitan Urban Indian Directors Group. I did want to just acknowledge that we have been joined by Councilmember Abdi Warsame, who I believe the ward that you represent is deeply impacted by this issue. And also wanted to make sure folks in the audience knew that we have the director of our emergency management operations, Barrett Lane, in joining us as well, who was able to lead and help on a conference call that we had last week on this issue, involving lots of different city leaders, mayor's office, and council, to hear more updates about this issue and think about solutions and strategies. So now we will have the United Communities Outreach Group, represented by Lance Lamont. Please come up. This is a group that's been funded by the City of Minneapolis's Collaborative Safety Strategies Program. So lo and behold, here's some good way to invest city resources to help with situations ahead of time before they took place. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Lance Lamont with United Communities Outreach. Also, we are in partnership and working with St. Stephen's, Southside Harm Reductions, Natives Against Heroin, and American Indian Movement. And this encampment was something that we're trying to prevent from last year. We noticed the influx of the homeless, and we were seeing other encampments on the bike trail, on the Mississippi River area, the Minnehaha Falls area, and on Lake Street, towards the alleyways in the back of the businesses. So that's why we're pushing last year, trying to make our main goal and objective to get some type of housing placement for Natives Against Heroin, so that we had somewhere where we can place people that were going from that transitional phase of not wanting to be homeless on the street no more, still a little actively using and a little bit clean, and getting ready for that transitional phase of getting a placement and treatment. So right now, I have worked with the other people at the encampment, and other outreach groups, and we collected data. From Friday last week, I collected a count of campers staying at the Hiawatha encampment. I was at 102. Just yesterday, it's at 176. Residents from the campus said that there's an influx of anywhere between 4 to 10 campers coming in on the day. Also, campers come in to check in to get resources as well too, and then they stay at other locations, like at the 94 Cedar Avenue Bridge. But they come down to that camp to actually like get food, get some hygiene products, get some water, maybe shower, change use the bathroom, and go back to their original campsite. There's been complaints about pimps, gangs, and drug dealers coming to the camp at nighttime, recruiting them in, trying to get people to buy drugs, trying to enforce the dealers that are already there at the camp. There's also St. Stephen's, Natives Against Heroin, United Communities Outreach, and Southside Harm Reductions have been doing security walks, check-ins, one-on-one relationship buildings, and conflict de-escalations. We talk with the campers. We pretty much build that relationship that we know them on a one-on-one basis, so they feel comfortable talking to us about the problems. Natives Against Heroin has been donating and serving hot meals for the past 4 months at the encampment, at the Hiawatha encampment. They've been doing it on Bloomington and on the Lake Street and on Cedar Avenue area as well too. And these are people that were originally in the East Phillips community, Lake Street area. But there is too many police reports, complaints. Some of them are past residents, meaning Lower Tenite tribes, that got evicted, that stayed in the East Phillips area. There's too much police engagement and harassment of telling them to move. You can't be here. You're going to go to jail. You're going to put on trespass. So they got pushed out of like the Little Earth area, the little East Phillips area, and they went to other camping areas where there's like assaults, rapes. People are getting really victimized at other camps that are not really visible. So the best area where they can feel safe and actually be in numbers is that Hiawatha area, so that there's visibility, there's cars driving by, there's people that can actually see them, there's people that can go check up on them, instead of being along the Mississippi River or the Minnehaha Falls area where there's no visibility. If there's an assault, if there's a rape, there's no one that can actually respond and help you in a timely manner. So there's actually like a opportunity for this encampment being there. Is there's safety there. There's actually a presence where all these organizations that have been receiving funding from the city, from the state and federal government for multiple years to actually implicate their programs and help these people, because they're actually in a location where they can find them, because most of these nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations say that one of the reasons why they can't get the resources out to the people is because they don't know where they're at and they can't locate them. Well, this camp being there gives them the location where they know exactly where they're at, so they can get the resources out to them. And I'll say another thing about that too is people will keep bringing up the fact of housing placement. A lot of these campers have detainers on their renters history. The ones that have been evicted, they have bad renters histories, so that's going to be a challenge for them to get housing placement or even to get transitional housing. A lot of the young men there and older men there have criminal records, violent criminal records, so that will get them denied from a lot of housing placement as well too. So there is a high need for an alternative housing placement instead of the ones that we've been using. There's too many requirements that disqualify a lot of the campers that are at that camp to even receive resources from these organizations. So that's about it.
Do you happen to have the picture?
Oh, the picture, yes. And Natives Against Heroin, Southside Harm Reduction, St. Stephen, and United Communities Outreach has also been doing needle cleanup and needle exchanges because of the high rate of use. And there's video pictures.
And as he's pulling that up to the projection screen, I just wanted to note for the council members that Natives Against Heroin is a group that the city funded about 2 years ago, perhaps last year, through Collaborative Safety Strategies program, and we also support St. Stephen's. And so this, if you could just tell us a little bit about this picture here.
This is Sam with Michael from Natives Against Heroin, Sam from Southside Harm Reductions, Natives Against Heroin, AIM, United Communities Outreach, and Southside Harm Reduction, St. Stephen's were all out yesterday doing needle exchange, and just within an hour and a half, one pretty good size container was picked up, over 100 used syringes. And then there's another one that wasn't took a picture of. It was a smaller container that was filled, and we couldn't close it. So that's if it within an hour and a half. So there is a high need for like what we do on a voluntary basis. I know that we got approved for a grant, but we still haven't received funding. So everything that we've been doing for these past few months is all voluntary, people doing it out their own pocket.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have questions from the dais? Maybe one question from Councilmember Ellison. Question, comment?
My question is not for you specifically, but maybe even for city staff. So I've got a couple, I'm trying to formulate a staff direction, but would love to engage in a little bit of a conversation with staff before I give an actual staff direction. I'm interested in making sure that housing does enter into this conversation, but I also am hearing loud and clear the points that you made about the barriers to housing. And so I've got, two things. One is I'm not that familiar with supervised injection sites, but I would love if folks could maybe give us some, maybe not now if the information is not on hand, but if city staff or experts in the room have any knowledge about supervised injection sites and how that could potentially be a prerequisite to, more serious help for folks, that would be incredibly helpful. And then I also would like to get more information, and before I give it in the form of a staff direction, just wanted to get the opinions of staff. I want to bring this conversation to the next HPD committee for September 12th with a focus on housing, but would that be enough time for staff to not just bring this presentation, but also potentially some recommendations on housing options for folks? And so would love to get an opinion from staff about timeline. If this presentation was going to be brought September 12th to HPD, would that be enough time to create some housing, to bring some recommendations forward? So, sorry, you can sit down. Thank you.
Chair Kano, Councilmember Ellison, thank you so much. And I wanted to just share with you a couple things, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness about how to bring forward a staff direction. We have, in fact, been thinking about housing in a variety of different ways. We have had conversations about safe injection sites or supervised injection sites. We are planning and we are looking right now at a variety of options without, obviously, until we do a thorough examination of where that has worked or where other things have worked or not. We plan to bring that forward to our policymakers as a compendium. I'd be remiss and would only recommend if I could get back to you. I know we have a meeting scheduled soon to talk about some housing options. Happy to do that at the Housing Committee. But I would like to defer in our meeting yesterday with community, we talked about creating a small subcommittee of folks to talk just about longer term housing needs. We're thinking creatively about what to do right now and in fact trying to support and help build up or perhaps scale out a proposal that was brought to us by a particular community member, Mike Gozi. So we're thinking about that and figuring out how to support that, but that may be a new model for, again, just emergency needs with a thought to thinking more appropriately to sort of more culturally appropriate housing. So I'd like the benefit of being sure, again, wanting to touch base with community and their coordinator and come together jointly to talk about possible proposals. And if it is okay with this committee to come back to you and let you know when a date would be appropriate.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I do want to just, I guess, point out to everyone in the room kind of knows this, that winter is approaching. And so the faster we could get on a timeline to make sure that this body has recommendations that we, can try to start moving forward on. And I know we'll all be working on that outside of committee as well. But just want to note the urgency there. So, thank you.
Thank you. And now we will have St. Stephen's join us to give us a rundown of the work that they've seen and have done. And then if anyone from Natives Against Heroin is here and would like to speak, we would love to have you come up after St. Stephen's.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and committee. And before I forget, also, there's another resident in the camp that if there's a few minutes would like to also speak afterwards, had some thoughts about the camp. So first of all, I want to thank again also the residents for coming here and talking. I would like to reiterate what was already said, which is that oftentimes people experiencing homelessness and people in poverty are forced to tell their stories again and again and again and again in order to justify need. That in and of itself is a form of trauma, and we work to try to lessen that, but we are a culprit in that, and we would just ask as we think about this that we have a trauma-informed approach in general going forward. So as many of you probably know, St. Stephen's considers housing a human right. We consider it a social justice issue that we lack housing in our community. We are focused on really two things as an outreach team at St. Stephen's. One is survivability and wellness of individuals. So the blunt reality is that people who are not alive don't get into housing. And so as an outreach team, our first effort is to keep people safe with whatever needs that they may need, staying warm in the wintertime, safe harm reduction equipment, etc. In regards to the camp at Hiawatha, we are very focused. There are many, many groups that are taking care of a lot of the survivability needs, and as people have indicated, there's almost too much stuff coming in that's not being distributed in a way that's really effective. So we are not focused on that. We are focused on the housing portion of that. And so I'll talk a little bit about the background of the camp, some of the current actions around that, some of the issues we're facing, and then hopefully I'll give you a laundry list of possible solutions and way to think about things. So again, the camp did start early this spring. It's been there for quite a while. There was one tent there initially. We have been engaging at that campsite along with other groups like Natives Against Heroin, the AICDC. Outreach teams have been there from the very beginning. I will return to this initial camp because it demonstrates some of the difficulties and barriers that we face in our attempts to get people into housing and permanent housing. So this is, the emergency is not the camp. The emergency has been going on for years. Something I say again and again and again, the emergency is now visible. And it's good that people are seeing that there's a problem. It's unfortunate that for years the same relative amount of people have been either struggling precariously housed or actually in a state of being living on the streets and being homeless. And so we want to ensure that while there is this focus that on this particular space, that the focus is not lost from these other places, because there are camps all over the city. There are individuals. We know that the Metro Transit system is functionally one of the larger homeless shelters within Hennepin County. And so there's a variety of issues that come about that are not just at this camp. So I hope that we can continue to keep the vision to the larger systemic problems. There are problems that are particular to this camp, being in the neighborhood that it's in, and there are clearly historical and political implications, being that it is largely a Native American camp, which I'm happy to hear is coming out to the forefront of the conversation, because it is something we have to return to again and again. So what are we doing with St. Stephen's? So we are able to do housing assessments. So within Hennepin County, I'm not sure how conversant you all are with that, so if you know, I apologize for repeating things. We have a coordinated entry system. The coordinated entry system is a coordinated system whereby people complete assessments, and it's basically an acuity scale, and the attempt then is to place individuals with providers that have the highest needs first, and that they will then interact with that provider and get into a permanent form of housing and supportive housing. This is not a fast process. People can get that assessment done on the street, or they can get it done in shelter. But the issue is that oftentimes, again, we've talked about housing, even in a best case scenario when we are able to house somebody, oftentimes we're housing people in places that are unfortunately marginally better than their improvised encampments that are outside. Oftentimes we are ending up, because of the high occupancy rate, we all know that we have one of the highest occupancy rates across the country, we end up housing people in substandard housing, places that aren't safe, places where they're having a lot of the same issues that are happening on the street are happening in the environments that they're living in the neighborhoods they're living in. It makes it very challenging for someone who's trying to make progress in their life. So those are some of the sort of the bigger issues around the system. The other is timeline. The assessment itself takes a good chunk of time. Meeting somebody, having them being willing to ask the questions. The questions can be very re-traumatizing as well. Once that goes into the system, there is a coordinated entry system that functions, but because we have a lack of housing stock, it can be an extremely long time. It can be months to years depending on how a person scores. So even if someone wants to move out of an encampment, the process to get out is punctuated with many, many, many issues that come along the way. And so again, it can take an extremely long period of time. I'm happy to report that in regards to this particular camp, that we've been working very closely with the other community organizations that are doing outreach. We are working very closely with the Office to End Homelessness to try to speed up those provider connections. And so we are doing that as much as we can. The other reality is it's a lack of there's resource issues across the board. From our perspective, as an outreach perspective, whether it's with Natives Against Heroin and funding issues, our particular team, we have 5 street outreach workers for all of Hennepin County, and we are obligated to be in certain sectors as part of funding streams. Our team and the teams of AICDC, there's a small team from People Inc. That are out there, are taxed, they're maxed out. These interactions require a lot of support and a lot of time out in the field. And so just from our perspective, it's very difficult to continue to get people into the process based upon the amount of work that there is to do. So that, again, is one of the other barriers that we're facing. The other problem that we're seeing that has caused the camp in a lot of ways is, and Lance referred to it, is it's constant displacement. MnDOT cleans a property up and it pushes people off. They show up in another sector and it's a neighborhood group, doesn't want them there. And then they start saying things and then they get pushed to another sector. Then they up in the parks and then they get tickets for being in the parks. And it's just, as a city, as a community, we are already spending the money and we are expending the people resources. We're just not doing it effectively. And so I think I think about how are some of the ways that we can think about effectively beginning to move forward. So one is, as we think about housing going forward, is having some housing that's truly high fidelity housing first. So what does that mean? That means housing where we understand that there's a certain percentage of people that are going to continue to use substances. That's just going to happen. And so having a place, we do have a few facilities like that, the Glenwood, Waukegan, but building out more facilities that have trained staff and the ability to really work with people to create a structured environment to keep them as safe as possible. That's one issue. Being able to expand the outreach efforts of the teams that I spoke about earlier, looking at what truly low-income housing is. 30% AMI serves a lot of people, but a lot of the people that we're talking about are well below 30% AMI housing. So we have to think about what truly affordable housing looks like. We have to think about, again, as others have said, affordable housing that is culturally appropriate, that fits for people. We have to think about shelter space. A lot of our shelters are not very inviting, and a lot of people choose not to go to them. They're mostly full, and oftentimes they're not culturally appropriate. And so the other thing to think about with that is that shelter is not housing. It's basically an emergency stopping ground in a process towards getting towards housing. But we need to get better about the actual shelter process. And then I think we need to also look at this as an opportunity to do some reconciliation. As noted earlier, we are talking about predominantly a Native American community. But across the city, we're also talking about African American communities that are disproportionately part of this homelessness system. As a community, I believe that we have an obligation to begin to move the conversation forward and to try to ensure that we are addressing the disparities that we have throughout our systems, but particularly as it impacts the most, those that are most deeply impacted by it. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Tribbett. Appreciate all the work you've done on the ground. And now we'll see if anybody from Natives Against Heroin would like to speak. And then you mentioned there was another, Mr. Tribbett, you mentioned there was another person from the impacted community. So if you could maybe be ready to speak after she speaks for about 3 minutes.
Bonjour, Monikwane Kwen de Goana Shabe Mang Majakwadi Kwen de Goana Shabe Mangandash, Kilani Fremont Indigenous Kaz Ashiningwadas Wayne Dasa Babunigis Makwandurum Amahan Dunjaba. What I said was, Bonjour, hello. My spirit names are Moon and Kwe, Flicker Bird Woman, and Majakwadi Kwe, Clear Sky Woman. My English name or my birth name is Kilani Fremont. I'm 16 years old. I'm Bear Clan, and my tribe is Omaha from Macy, Nebraska, but I've lived and grown up in Minneapolis, Minnesota my whole life. A lot of things that my family does is we work with Natives Against Heroin, and my family was also born into the American Indian movement. My great uncle is Clyde Belcourt, and I've been doing activism since I was a little kid. One of the things that I bring to the camp is drumming and singing. I am a official. Me and my sister, we are an official drum group for Natives Against Heroin. We are called Sky Sisters, and what we do is we learn songs that we can bring to help heal our people there, because we look to those people as our family. They're our aunts and uncles and cousins and brothers and all that. So we look at all the people at the camps as our brothers and sisters and just a huge family. And that's why we feel so needing to be able to help them, is because we wouldn't want to be out there. I mean, to speak from my family's perspective, my family is homeless right now. But it doesn't look like it. Even though we're struggling with money and finding a place of our own, we're still out there giving back to that community. With what Natives Against Heroin are doing, we're volunteering out there, and a lot of the stuff that we are giving out to the camps is coming out from our own pockets, and that's a lot to say from these families. Some of them are coming from North Side, some are coming from all out, and just giving food. A couple nights ago, a group came from the Powell and came with the rest of the food that was not eaten at the Powell. Sometimes when people are at the Powell's, they'll take the food and they'll throw it away. This family is generous enough to take all the food with them, bring it down to the camp, and they were out there about 11 o'clock giving out food. My family, then we loaded up our car and we took it to other camps around the community who are scared to come out to littler trails because it's too dangerous and they don't want to get hurt out there. And that's one thing that Natives Against Heroin is trying to do, is doing all-night patrols and all-day patrols, so that way we can keep it more safe for the women and children there. Other things that I wanted to talk about was kind of like others were saying, was that we are doing at least 3 times a week, we'll be out there handing out food, a big meal of food. Other times we're doing small things like water and bringing out plates to everybody. And that's one big thing we're doing to keep the people fed. When we first started a couple months ago with bringing out just water, we'd run out halfway through the trail. And nowadays we got so much help with bringing water and food in that some nights we'll go and nobody will want water because enough water is being brought out. And I'm glad that's happening out there. But that's water and food isn't the only problem. Hygiene is also a big problem out there, which is why my grandmother, where she volunteers at a homeless shelter, actually. And what she does is she asks her advocate if she can get care packs where it has toiletries and hygiene products that they need, such as deodorant and toothpaste, toothbrushes, towels, and stuff like that. And so that's one thing my family does on our own, is we go out and hand out care packs to the camp. I know we talked a little bit about the needle exchange, and Lance Lamont showed a picture. We do those when we do the needle exchange. We also hand out other things that they might need, because we're not exactly supporting it, but we don't want them using dirty needles every time. So we hand out clean needles, And what we do is we have if they have needles, they give them to us. We put them in a canister where they, can't poke anyone, and then we give them clean needles. If they give us 3, we give them 1 clean needle. If they give us 5, we give them 3. So with the camps, they're keeping their needles so we don't find them out on the streets more. And we give them alcohol wipes to clean their wounds and Band-Aids and stuff like that so they don't harm themselves anymore. One thing I also want to bring up is that Natives Against Heroin are doing surveys for the campers to see which tribes they're from, to see if they can get help from the tribes to send to their people. I think James Cross this morning at the press conference said there was about, I think it was 17 different tribes living at the camp right now. And so, with having those tribes, being able to, ask the tribes for money too is going to help us get to the things. Another thing that people are worried about is that school is coming up and these kids don't have, like I said, there are kids out there and some of them are going to school and they don't have nothing to go to school in. They don't have any clothes, they don't have any school supplies. And that's one thing that we want to bring to the camps for the kids are the school supplies. And I think that's all I have for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all your work on this issue. Just looking around to see if we have any questions from council members. And we have another testimony, please. And after that, we'll take our next steps on this presentation.
I'd like to say hello to all the council members up there. My name is John Carlbon, and I've been at the camp since it started. Excuse me if I bounce around. There's a lot of different issues. Homelessness is tearing families apart, communities apart. We organized the team over there, probably about 10 of us that go around and distribute the donations to people in the camp. Sarge, he comes out and helps with donations and support, and appreciate that. The one issue about the drugs and the mental wellness of people, there needs to be some place where people can go and get the mental health that they need, and for the drug addiction. That's one of the big problems over there is drug addiction, and the homelessness is, like they said, moving around everywhere in Minneapolis. It's not just Native Americans, it's all nationalities. The team over there supports everybody that is there, don't matter whatever color you are. One issue is that we need a place for Native Americans to live, like a housing, not like Little Earth, but somewhere where they can go and get in. A lot of people have criminal backgrounds, violent criminal backgrounds. They can't get into housing. People got mental issues, UDs. So that's like a lot of the people over at the camp, they got them issues and problems that's preventing them from getting housing. The sanitation, that's another issue people talked about. They did bring over, like I said, toilets, in water to wash your hands, in drinking fountains. Another issue is the safety of not only the women there, but everybody there. There is a problem with drug dealing. It's getting really bad now. Sarge, he comes around and actually, like they said, he stayed. I think a couple of nights he camped over, and the police presence is a good thing because when they are around, it seems like they're still there, the drug dealers and all that, but everything goes. People start going in and doing whatever they're doing in the inside instead of outside, so it's a lot safer when the police department comes around. One more thing is that we have a list of names of people that are there from the beginning and the people that are there now. So the names on that list, when people are supposed to be getting housing, you guys are saying that you're going to get housing for people that are there. So the people on that list, we want to make sure, like when you say, John got a place to live or whatever, we want to be able to look and check on that list and say, yeah, that he has, or no, that he hasn't. Because that is an issue of trust. I believe that they are not, you know what, they give us 60 days or whatever. I don't think it's going to be done in 60 days. There is like a lot of people to give housing to. So the list is going to be checked, I believe, like I said, once somebody is moved, their name or whatever will be taken off of that list. But the list is going to stay there until everybody on that list has housing, and the issue over on Hiawatha is no more people over there homeless. Waikagon, people can't get in there. Felonies, UDs, Little people can't get in there because of felonies, UDs. So housing is a very, very important issue for the city of Minneapolis. So I would just like to thank you guys for listening to everybody today and listening to me. And I just hope that we get it done and take care of everybody. And thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Really appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to be here and talk to us about this issue. Please know that you're not alone. We are here having this discussion for very specific reasons. And I know that Councilmember Abdi Warsame has been active and was there at the press conference this morning. Did you want to share any words with the community right now?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And yeah, I was at the press conference, and there were many members of the community that showed up, and I totally agree with them. I think this somebody described it as a visual manifestation of our inequality, which you have at that camp. That we are a very affluent city, we're a rich city, and yet you don't see homeless camps in Minneapolis. But that doesn't mean Minneapolis doesn't have a homeless population or doesn't have people who are suffering. So when you see this, I think it shows in a real way the inequality of our rich city. And the fact that this is a failure of policy making. We have not had as much focus on the underprivileged, on our city, whether it's education, whether it's job skills development, whether it's housing. Minneapolis is affordable to some people, but it's not affordable to the majority of people of color and poor people. So when you see this camp and what it represents our failures. And I appreciate all the work that's being done, the leadership of the community, and we have a timeline, but it has to be coordinated. And I get members of my community in Ward 6 that want to help and don't know how to help. As individual citizens, how can I contribute? What can I give? And I think what we had today is a coordinated effort. We are going to have a coordinated one from the community as well as the city that's going to help coordinate all these efforts. And I think that's what we need to do, is just to play our part, but to make sure, just like Councilmember Ellison just mentioned, that winter is coming, the school season is coming, and we need to get these things done before winter arrives. Otherwise, we're going to have a catastrophe on our hands. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Warsame. And so do we have, I see we have two council members in queue here. So Councilmember Andrea Jenkins, followed by Councilmember Fletcher, and then Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's showing up today and really continuously re-traumatizing yourselves by having to continuously tell these stories over and over again. It is a symptom of much deeper systemic issues in our culture and society. I really appreciate all of the community organizations that have really stepped forward to try to address the issue, but also to bring these issues to greater visibility and shine a brighter light, so that that we all as a city can see our shortcomings and really try to work together to come up with some solutions to these challenges that, certainly are not unique to Minneapolis, but absolutely are our responsibility to try to help address. So thank you all for being here, and I'm ready to roll my sleeves up and really try to address these issues, as I'm sure all of my colleagues are as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll add my thanks to everyone who came and testified. I know that it is painful to share these stories. It is painful to represent the city in a moment when we have to confront our failures. I want to say, as a representative of the city, I'm sorry. We haven't done enough, and we need to do better. I also want to just name the holes that we're digging ourselves out of. We haven't built enough housing. We've identified housing as an issue. We know that we have to figure out how to create low barrier housing that doesn't exclude people. And I appreciate the very specific solutions and advice that came forward today from St. Stephen's and others. I think it's very, very helpful to hear exactly the barriers that are being faced. I also think that we heard some stories that indicate that there are things we're getting right now, and I want to acknowledge that. I think that we heard stories about our city staff really coming in behind community leadership to try to find ways to be supportive in this moment, and we know that that's not something the city has always done well, and so I'm very proud of the city response to the extent that we really are getting with community leadership and figuring out ways to come in and be supportive in this moment. And it's okay that not everybody is trusting based on our past, but I'm glad that we're acting in the present in a way that that makes us proud. We heard stories that we've inherited a past of policing that did not make our city proud and that did not make people trust our officers in uniform. We heard about tents being cut, and we heard about people feeling harassed. We also heard about an incredible trusting relationship with Sergeant Snyder and the relational work that's happening over there. And we heard testimony from people at the encampments saying that police presence today is making people feel safer. And so we are doing things in a way that is a good look for our city right now in our response to a problem that we didn't always that we haven't always dealt with as well. And so I want to acknowledge really good work that's happening at the same time that we acknowledge the sort of historical pain and trauma and collected history that we have to work through. And so I am with my colleagues sort of, ready to get to work and try to catch up on some long overdue work. So thank you for being here and calling attention to this issue.
Councilmember Ellison.
Madam Chair, thank you. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot today. Yeah, and I don't know if I'm like upset or if I'm over caffeinated, but I'm definitely like kind of shaken up here. I used to work at Avenues for Homeless Youth, and so this issue is something that is very real to me, and I feel like I've been able to work with our homeless population here in my early 20s and now as an elected being tasked with my colleagues in solving these issues. I heard Councilmember Warsami say that this is a reflection of the city's failures, and I heard Councilmember Fletcher apologize for those failures. And while I'm often kind of hesitant to apologize for circumstances that are so systemic that they're way beyond any individual on this desk, that really resonated with me, both of those accounts. And I think that it is on us to come up with some solutions. And I know that a couple of months ago during the winter, I participated in the point in time count with St. Stephen's and was out there doing interviews with folks. And I knew then that I wanted to bring up the issues of supervised injection sites and has it come up, and now we've it's kind of reached a head where we have to address it. And so I've given the motion that I want to make a little bit of thought. I'm not going to give a staff direction, but I do want to refer that staff bring this presentation to the HPD committee on September 12th to continue this conversation with a focus on housing options, not necessarily the answer, but a focus on housing options and a focus on safe consumption sites, because I do want to make sure that we continue at least on those two things. And to the folks who came into this room to represent the camp and to represent yourselves, I do want to thank you, and to staff who have been on top of this. I want to thank you all as well. And so let's get to work and do something about this issue. Thank you. So that's my motion.
Wonderful. So we have a motion on the table to refer this to the Housing Committee for the September 12th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And that carries forward. So for the community and our staff, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you for your dedication and hard work to protect and uphold the values of the city of Minneapolis and our residents. We look forward to continuing this discussion with a deeper focus on housing on September 12th. So you can come to this room again on that day. I believe, do you all meet at 1:30? Okay. Housing Committee, do you all meet at 1:30?
Yes.
Okay, 1:30. So you can come back here on September 12th at 1:30 to continue this discussion as part of the council members who will be part of the Housing Committee that day to look at issues connected to this encampment and short and long-term solutions around housing. So thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to our next discussion item, which is a community forums report that I will be walking you through for the next couple of, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 minutes, depending on how many questions we have. And so I will hand over the chairmanship of the committee to our vice chair, Councilmember Steve Fletcher, so that I can walk through this. And if folks have questions, he will be helping to run the meeting at the time. So if I could have the clerk's help in putting the report up on the projector. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Cano, I'll just need a minute.
Okay, so are we ready? Is this good?
Chair Cano, Leda's going to have to click for you for a second so I can get this thing fired up.
Sure.
My apologies.
Yep. She knows the report well. All right, so as you all remember, we had 2 beautiful community forums at the beginning of the year as part of the work of the Public Safety Committee. So we wanted to just walk you through a report of the findings of those actions and sort of next steps as we look at what the Public Safety Committee will be tackling for the next couple of years, as well as the City Council in our strategic planning session. So what you'll see here is a table of contents that identifies or outlines the conversation we'll be having today. So our executive summary really lays out some of the high-level points of the community engagement work, which was to bring more transparency, accountability, community engagement to our committee and city government. We engaged 350 residents with 280 distinct comments coming back to us as raw data for the type of work the community residents wanted us to take on. And The reason why we took up this work as page 4 in terms of the context is we knew that the public safety issues of our city and improving police-community relations was one of the mayor's top priorities. As the Public Safety Committee this year, we are a new committee. None of us have sat on the Public Safety Committee before, besides Councilmember Lene Palmisano. We have a new chair and vice chair, as well as new council members altogether. So it was really important to set the tone with community engagement from the get-go. We also know that over the years, this has been a big community demand to change the culture of policing and safety in our city. And we also acknowledge and are responding to recent events in our state, in our city, when it comes to officer-involved shootings, and recognizing the voice of the Black Lives Matter movement and understanding the historical trauma that many of our community members carry with them as we make up for decades of lack of engagement on significant issues such as this one. We also know that there's a big shift towards a co-governance model, and many of us believe in that, and so we decided to take up these community engagement forums as a way to demonstrate that. So shifting to the planning process, just wanted to outline some of the key planning points that our office took the lead on to bring these forums together, which involved visioning the structure and solutions-oriented approach to these conversations. We hired a graphic designer that could put together a engaging set of flyers and community outreach tools to make sure that we went above and beyond your normal city hall look, but really engaged a community sensibility. We also hired facilitators and met with them extensively, as well as with our visual note taker, which involved mapping out the variety of ways that community would be able to give and share their voice at these forums, as well as doing on-site visits and run-throughs. And then we also did a significant change in the middle of the sessions, in between session 1 and or after session 1 and leading into session 2. We decided that we needed to kind of regroup and ensure that the second session was going to be even more meaningful and constructive. And so we decided to reach out to our friends and allies in City Hall to provide facilitation at each table, which wasn't part of session 1, but then was part of session 2. So we huddled up with volunteers who offered to be trained to help facilitate the conversation at each table in session 2. And so I just wanted to briefly thank a lot of the members that were a part of that. And so from the NCR team, we had Jasmine Logan, Karen Moe, Greg Simbeck, Nicholas Nyo, Kelly Mullman, Kelly Rose Jones, and Kelly Mullman is actually with sustainability, but Christina Kendrick. We had a few people coalesce around the NCR banner to help us pull off the second session, and council staff also stepped up. Samantha Priest-Stinson, Sarah Gengeloff, David Safran, Danny Hans, John Freud, Aisha, and Sarah Lopez. These are all folks who really helped us pull the second session together by ensuring that they were able to be there to continue the discussion at the table level and ensure folks were having good conversations and engaging each other and moving the discussion along. So in terms of the budget, we put this together quickly at the beginning of the year, and this is a summary of the amount of money that was spent on hosting these conversations and this engagement. As you'll see there, the two sessions pretty much averaged out to the same amount of money. And then we'll move on to outreach and communications. So with our outreach and communications for the community sessions, we put everything, all the cylinders on go. We engaged the communications department to ensure that our city Facebook, Twitter, news bites, news releases to neighborhood associations, and our MPD leaders, our ward newsletters, and city calendars all reflected the community forums that we were hosting. We also included a special outreach to ethnic communities and ensuring that we did some Spanish language radio spots, and would hope that in the future we can do more in other languages as well. But really did try to stretch the the definition of communications and outreach on this particular effort to ensure that as many communities as possible could join us for these very significant conversations, which involved more than 8 city departments, including the Minneapolis Police Department, Fire Department, the City Coordinator's Office, the City Attorney's Office, 911, our Emergency Department, Neighborhood and Community Relations, as well as Civil Rights. And so you'll see here a sample of the flyers and the communications that were sent out and multilingual messages to ensure that we were engaging as many folks as possible. And then we dive into the actual forums. And so in the forums themselves, we had the World Cafe methodology implemented by Dave and Loretta Ellis, who came recommended by the mayor's office. Every table had about 8 folks, and we asked 2 guiding questions. What would you like to build on or change when it comes to public safety? And what would Minneapolis look or feel like if all of our public safety needs were addressed? Folks had 20 to 30 minutes to discuss each question. We were asking people to identify priorities and push twice to distill to 3 priorities and then distill down to 1. And all of that information was caught on our, what you'll see here, these big sticky notes or the paper pads that each table had. And we collected all of these at the end of each session. We also captured feedback from our visual note taker, drawn well, which was Lisa Troutman, who was able to capture some of the big themes and the urgent community questions that were being posed. Additionally, we had an amazing crew of staff members led by Leda Schuster, who's here with us today from the 9th Ward office, who then put in all the raw data, the 280 plus comments, into a software system to help pick out the words that would resonate the most or repeated themselves the most in the conversations that we were able to capture on paper. And so as you'll see here, a lot of these public safety issues are connected to issues of economic development, housing, and some public health issues such as the opioid and the environment around us. So the resident feedback was then put together into categories, and what you'll see here is the groupings with the socioeconomic opportunities leading the way and having some miscellaneous and youth initiatives being a little bit lower on the priority list, but nonetheless are there. And so we do have a list of all of the raw data for you that can be handed out. And do we have copies of that up here right now? Okay, if you could pass that on down to the council members.
Chair Kano, I did put one at each seat.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, thank you so much. So, yep, so you'll see here it's this white piece of paper with maybe 3 or 4 pages, double-sided. So this is all of the raw comments coming from.
6-point font.
Well, I think we were trying to save paper. So this can be circulated via email as well, so you can have the opportunity to read this at your leisure in your offices. And so I'll walk you through some of the specifics that were highlighted in the socioeconomic opportunities, which was 29% of the report back comments. And so things from creating more jobs to supporting more affordable housing to supporting the homeless population. We have addressing the drugs and opioid crisis, addressing disparities in education, and things like, making sure everyone feels respected and also improving cooperation with city and county officials to lead into that socio and economic opportunity stage. We have recommendations at 13% on policy changes. So we have policy changes in terms of the police body worn camera program, asking police officers to use rubber bullets, municipal ID program, which we're luckily working on, immigration reform issues, and in increasing the level of accountability for Johns or sex offenders with who are out to commercially sexually exploit some of the women in our community. And so then we move on to slide number 17, which is our police community relations tab with 12%. And we have here community members who want more police involved in community events, who want more interaction and more positive interaction with our officers, as well as recognizing that they sometimes avoid calling the police for fear of making situations worse. And so we really do have to dig deep to figure out what is it that we can do to ensure that our community feels like the police is a resource all around for them and not something to necessarily avoid. Page 18, we talk about police and union accountability with 12% of the response rate. So folks concerned about the role of the police union and some of this policing culture issues, the role of sexism and racism in the workforce, wanting more transparency in incidents of police misconduct and the actions that correspond to that, as well as again, trying to figure out how do we have more oversight of the police union behavior and actions stemming from that. We have an 11% response rate on budget investments, and so folks wanted to see more divestment from police and more investment in community programming, more centering of community-led programs, and making sure that we fund community-based initiatives such as the community navigators, and kind of questioning what the priority is around our budget for that. So the next slide is about training, diversity, and cultural competency. And for that, we have an 11% response rate in terms of the folks who, out of the 280 comments, 11% said that this was something they wanted to focus on. So we want our police officers to have a deeper understanding of the culture of the communities they serve and represent. We want more increased diversity so that they do reflect those communities that live in Minneapolis, and more comprehensive training for officers with expanded de-escalation philosophies and approach. Slide number 21 is about the youth initiatives, and so 6% of the 280 responders or comments that we were able to get from these sessions talked about the need for more programs and centers available for youth, for more safe transit options for the youth to get to these places, and for more mentorship programs that incentivize and pair older youth with younger children around the mentorship models. In terms of next steps to what we will do with the information that we gathered from these two community forums, we do have a city landing page, a city website where community folks can log in to see all the comments that people submitted, to continue to submit comments, and to read about the approach and the work that we did through those community sessions. There's pictures, there's text and information walking people through the process that we put together for these forums, and the raw data is there as well, so folks can log in and see it. We do plan to use this data for our Public Safety Committee planning for the next couple of years to come, and I'm glad to hear that we're going to be getting together next week for our City Council Strategic Planning session, where we hope that this information that we're sharing with you today will be used through yourself to inform the discussion and the strategic planning that we have as a council, that can then also serve to serve as a foundation for our public safety planning for the next 3 years. And then we also want to make sure that this information is aligned with our city department business plans, especially the ones that report to public safety. And I know that part of that work will happen at the strategic planning session next week. And we also want to say that because of the vigorous amount of community engagement that this topic has seen over the year, Councilmember Fletcher and I met and discussed the idea to permanently host a regular public comment period at each of our committee meetings moving forward, so that anybody that wants to come and talk to us about public safety issues can feel free to take that time to share their thoughts and their ideas with us without having to necessarily wait for the next community meeting that we host on this issue, or wait for the next emergency to pop up, so that they're coming here to build relationships with us long term. And so to wrap this up, I wanted to make sure that we shared a special thank you to many of the folks who contributed to this effort to putting together these 2 sessions at the beginning of the year, which again are unprecedented for the Public Safety Committee, at least in my year's knowledge of 5 years of serving on the council. And I did want to just start off by thanking Leda Schuster, who is here with us today, who helped to put the report together, helped to manage the data collection and host the conversations citywide. She's an amazing project manager and very professional delivery of services on this front. And Leda, without you, I just want to let you know that we would not have been able to pull this off. And so I just want to thank you for diving in and for being such a powerhouse organizer to make sure that these 2 sessions were well worth the time that the council members and all the other elected officials and city staff who came to engage with our community, and that all of the community members who showed up felt like there was something there to be done and to be discussed. Jen White from the mayor's office, Casey Carl in the city clerk's office, who also stepped up to help us with the budgeting issues, communications, and Greta Bergstrom, who we met with consistently to ensure that all of our messaging was ready to go. Neighborhood and community relations with Christina Kendrick, who also helped to recruit many of the folks who helped us to have the 2nd session. And we have the 4th Ward Senior Policy Aide, Samantha Priest-Stinson, and the 11th Ward Senior Policy Aide, Sarah Gangeloff, who all helped to step up to make sure that all of the details of these events were put together. So I'm happy to take questions and would love to hear discussion from you about what you think about these reports, this information, and what you think we should do on this next.
All right. Are there any questions or comments for Councilmember Cano? Councilmember Ellison.
Just have a comment. Just wanted to thank Councilmember Cano and Leda and the whole Ward 9 office. I think that the initiative and the leadership to be out in community to talk about public safety, I mean, the meetings were tough, right? And I don't want to romanticize, the fact that we, got out there and we did it because it's tough and it's hard work. And some of the responses were tough. And I think a lot of folks have a lot of anxiety and a lot of really earned frustration with how community safety conversations have gone in the past. And so the easy thing for this committee and for you would have just been to run this committee as usual, right? But that's not what you chose to do. You chose to get out there in community to demonstrate leadership on the council and on this committee in that way as the chair. And I really appreciate your resolve and bravery, quite frankly, in getting out there, having these tough conversations, and being able to get this kind of feedback and data that I think will inform how we proceed as a committee. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jenkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and also to Councilmember Cano. I mean, it really is a huge risk to take our formal committee meetings out into a different environment, and we, Councilmember Ellison stated that, it was no walk in the park, and I would just even go further to state that, there were a number of events that happened in our community that were beyond our control that even exacerbated those gatherings further. And so it does take a lot of, I think, courage and resolve to try and do things in a new and different way. And I'm really proud to be a part of this this council and the work that we are doing to engage more community members in these decision-making processes. And it's scary and it's new, but I think we're walking that path, and Councilmember Cano, you're leading the way on that. So, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and it's going to continue to be challenging and difficult. But I do appreciate the opportunity for people to bring their voices to the public safety and and Emergency Management Committee on a more regular basis. I hope that we can develop a process where people can engage with this community in meaningful and respectful ways, and that's our work to do, to try to create that kind of environment. But it's a great report. We engaged a number of people, and I think it is going to inform our strategic planning work that we are embarking upon in the coming weeks and months. And so I just want to say thank you for leading this effort, and to all the staff and everybody that was involved, and to the community too for showing up for such a challenging conversation.
I'll second what my colleagues have already said, and just note that we have a lot of ways that we elicit community feedback, but I think that these forums, getting out into the community, invited some people who are not the usual suspects who we hear from all the time, and who are not necessarily comfortable standing in this room, getting on cable to provide testimony. And I think that we did hear some voices that we don't always hear. And I also think that the exercise of doing a more disciplined deep dive and analysis into the comments that we get, to hold ourselves accountable for making sure that we're listening to all the comments and that we're actually kind of doing that analytic work, I think is a helpful exercise. And I'm looking forward to digging into it more and really making sure that we understand what we've learned. But I'm really appreciative of your leadership in making sure that we had the opportunity to do that learning. So thank you for that. And unless there are any more comments, I will hand back the chair to wrap up the meeting.
Well, thank you, council members. I appreciate you all stepping up to the bat with me on this. I feel like our community is hungry for this kind of engagement because we haven't had that much of it in the past, and the times are different now in terms of the issues that we're tackling. To just looking back at the last year and a half, the different things that people have had to go through. So I do just want to say that we should think about what we want to do with next year as we begin, in terms of how do we continue these kinds of conversations in a proactive manner that can feel substantial and like you mentioned, that don't necessarily rely on an emergency for then the fire to be ignited, for a place like this to be the convening location. But how do we focus on some solutions that folks will truly feel like are making a big difference in their life? And that's, I think, one of the takeaways for me from these sessions is that there was still so much trauma and hurt and pain that people were processing at some of these sessions that sometimes we didn't get a chance to dig deeper into the actions that we wanted to take as a city and community together to solve some of the issues that we know are still there. So I'm hoping that we can all do some thinking around that and think about what we want to do next year when it's the anniversary of our community engagement forums and see where we take it there. But I do just want to say one more time, thank you to the staff who helped to put this together. It was a very team-oriented effort, and I don't know if, Leila, you would like to share some words. You were intimately involved in this effort, and if you have any thoughts about what you'd like to say about the forums, the work, what you think about this for the future. You're a very strategic staff member of the 9th Ward office, and I'm always very pleased to hear what your thoughts are on some of these pieces of work.
Sure. Madam Chair and members of the Public Safety and Emergency Management Committee, thank you for the support that I got from your leadership and trusting me in driving this project. Like Councilmember Cano said, this was a citywide effort. It was just a multi-departmental initiative, a lot of communication, and going back to your point, was the first time we brought the entire city leadership, including the mayor's office, to the community. We knew it was going to be challenging. We knew it was going to be hard because the community's hurt and they needed to have a voice in those forums, and they did. Moving forward, the goal is to continue this outreach to the community and opening different mechanisms in which they can come and continue talking about the things that matter to them, the things that they want you to take action on. And not only the opportunity to come and talk here to you during the public PSEM committee meetings, but also we will be working on a landing page which actually exists right now from the forums, and we will enable a contact form in which community members will be able to send comments and feedback about anything related to public safety. The goal is to continue analyzing those new comments and provide you with those comments in the future so you are informed about what the community is talking throughout the entire time. But with that, again, a special thanks to your offices and your staff. They were very helpful in helping finalizing this report.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. Muchísimas gracias. All right. Well, without further questions, let's receive and file this report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And that is approved. Without further business before us, our committee is finito.